Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn as GMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 87, Welcome to Vesrah. Sorry, it's been a minute since I've uploaded a video. My watch broke, so I guess you could say that I lost track of time. Also, other stuff was going on too, but this is a better explanation. Also, I want to make sure that you understand this does not mean that we're starting another time travel storyline or anything like that. It's just literally my watch just doesn't keep time anymore. I'm just gonna take it off. But when we last left off, our party was on a ship heading towards the water Ashari. When the episode opens, Matt asks everybody what they've been up to for the journey so far, as they've been killing time on the boat. Vax is shadowing Grog, trying to keep him occupied and distracted from the fact that he has no gnomes. Terry puts some spells into some coins so his allies can use some of his magic on their own in future encounters. Percy's doing some tinkering, and Terry's helping with that as well. Don't worry, they'll do more tinkering later in the episode. We'll come back to that for the moment that you're all waiting for. But first, Matt says that 3 days into the journey, Vex sees a dark spot on the horizon. This is honestly just a fantastic opening move from Matt. There's no time wasted here. He just asks, what have you all been up to? And once he has their answers, he doesn't ask them all to roleplay what they were doing in this exact moment. He just introduces a new element for them to interact with. It's really very clean. Matt tells Vex that what she sees is too small for a landmass, but it is stationary. However, when Vex borrows a telescope from a crew member and tries to get a better look at it, the shape goes under the water. Her theory is that this was some sort of sea monster. Meanwhile, the rest of the players don't see this, so they were just going about their typical business on the ship.
Nothing.
Hey, man.
What?
You can't walk off in the middle of a game of hide and seek again. I've been in a barrel for an hour. I fell asleep in there.
I'm sorry, I get so distracted. Did someone find you?
No, I just woke up in a barrel. I don't even know
Found
what
you.
time it is. Touche.
However, a couple of hours later, they notice a localized fog bank forming in front of the ship, like keyless fog spells, but bigger. And this gets them thinking, is this the Ashari? It's entirely possible that this is the Water Tribe coming to greet this ship, or trying to protect their home from this ship. However, that's not quite what Matt has in mind. Keyleth and Taryon both cast Alter Self to give themselves gills and dive into the water to try to see what's going on underneath. And what they see is very strange. They see that the water is being displaced, like it looks like there's a ship in the water, but there's no ship. The obvious conclusion, and the one the players draw, is that there's something invisible in the water, which would track with how the shape disappeared earlier. At this point, something slams into the side of our ship, and iron hooks connect to the railing of our ship. The enemies are beginning to board. Terry helps Keyleth get back on the ship, and everybody rolls for initiative. And I really appreciate that Matt did not call for that roll until everybody was back on the ship. It's going to make handling the logistics of this combat a whole lot easier. I don't know if Matt did that on purpose, but I definitely think it is a nice move just to get these characters all on the same ship together before initiative is called, rather than trying to deal with their movement during initiative, because otherwise Keyleth and Terry might wind up spending their first full round of combat doing nothing but getting back up on the boat. But if you handle that out of initiative, like Matt did here, then it only takes like 30 seconds, and they can actually participate in the fight. Now, as the players pretty much figured out by this point, this is not the Ashari. This is, well, maybe not a random encounter in the way we typically think of it, but certainly an encounter that is not connected to the main plot right now. Instead, this is a relatively lower stakes encounter, and one that will actually give the players an opportunity to use their cool powers. This is important for a number of reasons. First, they haven't fought with Terry yet. Well, okay, they fought with Terry, but they haven't fought alongside Terry. I think that the goal of an encounter like this is to make sure that the players know what Terry can do in combat, and to give Sam a chance to take his character for a spin before they get into the main plot. Obviously, a little bit of that has already happened due to the shenanigans of the last episode, but I still think you need the players to be able to see what happens when Sam takes his character for a proper, completely unproblematic test drive. You need a fight like this so he can actually be let off the chain. Additionally, this is the first combat encounter in 6 episodes, again, not counting the one the players started when they attacked their new friend. And their last big combat encounter, again, not counting the hazing, was against that ancient green dragon that killed 2 of them. They need a fight that has just a little bit lower stakes than that. So it's time to just fight some pirates. Some bad guys board the ship, and there's also a water elemental, and a big fish guy with water for legs, a Merid, a water genie. Also, just a note at this point, in theory they're all surrounded by fog, but also I think the ship was supposed to be invisible, and now it's not. I don't really know what happened there, it seems to have just been dropped. Then as for the fog, it doesn't really make a big difference in the fight, which is probably a good thing. If everyone had been rolling with disadvantage because they couldn't see, this fight would be a lot less fun. Can you imagine a fight where everybody is rolling with disadvantage? And it's initiative, so here are some highlights. Is what I normally say when I talk about the parts of combat where we can learn something interesting, where somebody takes a turn that gives us an interesting lesson in some way. But honestly, all the interesting things that happen in this fight are in the setup. Like, Matt has 2 boats next to each other, which is good, but there's also a vertical aspect that comes into play during this fight. It comes into play a lot, actually. You can knock people off of the boats. Good guys and bad guys both knock their opponents off these boats at various points throughout the fight, and it really elevates this combat. Additionally, later in the fight, our heroes are trying to pry the hooks off of their ship to make it easier to get away, and Matt honors this choice by having the edges of the ship drift apart from each other when they're no longer attached. When they're only attached by one corner of the ship, the relationship between the 2 ships completely changes. They're no longer just side by side typically. They diverge, but they're still connected by the other ends. It's a very deceptively simple map because once you actually start interacting with it, it reveals so many different ways the characters can interact with it even more. Additionally, I think maybe even just putting the hooks into the railing gave the players a very clear win condition aside from kill everyone. We may not have consciously thought of it that way, but I think on some level, it occurs to all of us that if the hooks are gone, the other ship can't really stick around. This means the players can really just play. You don't have to kill everybody, you don't have to drop everyone to 0 hit points, you just need to get them off of your boat and make it impossible for their boat to catch your boat by cutting the lines that connect your ships together. And almost immediately, Keyleth also starts using control water to sink the pirate ship. She's doing that throughout the fight, slowly sinking the enemy ship. I think she realizes that if they can just get everybody off of their boats and she can disable the other ship, that will effectively mean the fight is over because the pirates won't be able to catch up with our heroes. That actually brings me to the play-by-play. See, typically, I say, here are the highlights of initiative, and I talk about the specific moves in battle that are interesting, but as I've already said, most of the interesting things are being done by Matt, and the players are just having fun. Please understand me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying the players aren't doing anything cool. Percy's shooting pirates off of the ship. It's very Pirates of the Caribbean as they're blasted backwards and over the railing. It's very fun. It just unfortunately means there's not a ton for us to talk about in this fight outside of specifically the way Matt set it up to give the players as much of a playground as possible. However, there is an exception to that. Towards the end of the combat, Taryon fights the Merid, and he uses his Ring of the Ram to attack the Water Genie, and he rolls a natural 20, and he instantly kills the Merid. But Sam asks if Terry can get knocked back by the recoil. The way the ring works is it summons basically a spectral ram that slams into somebody and knocks them back, and the Merid took so much damage that it didn't matter, but it theoretically would have knocked them into the ocean. But Sam asks if he can get knocked back instead. And it's not because this magic inherently has a recoil risk, it's because Sam thinks of Terry as a total newbie, and rolling a natural 20 to kill this enemy, I think just feels too cool to him. And so he kind of asks Matt to help him take the wind out of his own sails, pun intended. Matt has Sam roll a dexterity check, and he rolls a 5, and he's knocked off the ship, much to Sam's delight. It's funny because my last video was about my first D&D character, who actually has a lot in common with Terry. My character wasn't wealthy, but he was absolutely a blonde, goateed wannabe hero. And in that video, I talked about his big awesome moment in his 3rd session, so the parallels continue, where he got this awesome moment in battle against a hobgoblin commander. My character smashed her in the face with a vial of oil, then ran up the wall, grabbed the torch out of the sconce, and brought it down on the hobgoblin's head, lighting her on fire. And I felt awesome. And I was also immediately humbled in much the same way Terry just was. I was just knocked unconscious by the other hobgoblins. But it still felt like this legendary moment for me. And I'm really proud of that character. I don't regret making someone who had so much in common with myself. I don't regret how I played that character at all. But I do see this moment, where Sam realizes how much fun it is to revel in failure when your character just needs to be taken down a peg. And I just admire that so much. I think you could also make the argument that he's still willing to do this because this is specifically a very low-stakes fight, and they've already dispatched most of the enemies by this point in the encounter. He has the freedom to play in his character's flaws a little bit more and advance his story because it's not going to hinder the experience for the other players in any way. They're not going to be harmed by that. I know those stories aren't exactly one for one. Sam is not really a new player anymore, so comparing this moment to the moment that I really got D&D is being a little bit unfair to myself. I realize that. But I just think it is so funny that this character is very similar in a lot of ways, and yet Sam does not want Terry to seem even a little bit cool at this point in his journey. I wonder if it's also a pushback to the fact that Scanlan often seems sort of effortlessly cool. Terry is not effortlessly cool. He's not cool at all, and in fact, he is trying very hard. Maybe not to be cool specifically, but he is certainly trying to be an awesome hero. But Sam really wants to make it clear that he's not there yet, and I think that's awesome. Anyway, Vax helps Terry out of the water, but he also magically checks to make sure he's not a demon. At some point, it's occurred to him that this could be an elaborate ruse by the Rakshasa to kill him. Matt whispers something to Liam, but I can just tell you right now, no, Terry is not a demon. Also, the last thing of note that happens is Trinket gets a kill, and Laura wishes Scanlan could have seen it, considering he always thought Trinket was basically useless. It is nice / heartbreaking to see just how much Laura still thinks about Scanlan. Far more often, it seems, than the rest of the party even does. Anyway, at the end of the battle, the other ship is definitely sinking, so our heroes quickly run over and loot it, while Keyleth uses control water to try to unsink it, try to keep it afloat long enough for them to properly check and see what they can find. They pry a gem off of the enemy ship, and they conclude that you can use that to create a localized fog cloud, so that's cool. They also find a scroll. They look into that later. They'll figure that out later. But down below, inside the ship, they also find a couple of cages. Not even bolted into the ship or anything, literally just rattling around down there. And there was a prisoner inside one of these cages who was just recently underwater and is now unconscious. Not a great combination. Vax takes him back to the Drensala Vis, and before they can wake him up, Matt goes to a break, because this is a good pause point. When they come back from their break, Keyleth uses her control water spell to pull the water out of his lungs, and the twins give him some hit points, and the man wakes up. He gives his name as Fenton Groose. He's the first mate of the ship of the Tempest Fang, and he's the last survivor of that ship. They were jumped by this pirate ship, he was captured, and the others in his crew did not make it. However, he doesn't know who our characters are, so he's very wary about them. And our heroes also suspect he might be somebody shady. After all, he's clamming up around them, he has tattoos, they don't seem to have any significance outside of just being intimidating and scary to people. There's clearly more to this guy that he doesn't want to share with them, more that they have not figured out. But the players don't really have any reason to keep pressing him for any information. He said he's okay being dropped off at the next port, he doesn't mind how long it takes to get there, and he even understands if they have to lock him up in the hold during that time. Which means there's no pressing reason to get more information out of him, because it doesn't change anything. It's also not like they're particularly worried that he's going to hurt them, considering how easily they dealt with these pirates. So there really isn't any tension here. It's not really a mystery, because the players don't care, outside of what seems like just idle curiosity. Now, they do know he's hiding information from them, and Terry even suggests torturing him, trying to get him to talk, but it's just not that important to the party. Like, obviously, Sam is joking when he suggests that. Terry might be earnest, but Sam knows they're not going to do that because they just don't care enough to. The crew escorts this guy down to the brig, and when the players are alone with the captain, they ask her, "Hey, have you heard of the Tempest Fang?" And she says, "Yeah, they're pirates." So this guy came from a pirate ship, but clearly all he wants to do is get back to port. What's he going to do after that? Apparently that's not Vox Machina's concern at all, and I don't blame them for that. Like, regardless of what he did for a living, if he's willing to just chill and mind his own business until they get back to port, then just drop him off at the next port. Who cares? They review their spoils from the other ship, and Terry casts Identify, because after several extended conversations with NPCs who could identify their magic items, somebody finally took the spell. You love to see it. He figures out how the fog marker works. That's the orb. It's called the fog marker. And he also finds out that the scroll is a scroll of programmed illusion. After that, Percy and Terry do some tinkering downstairs. They basically create a small hooded lantern that can house one of the opal gems from Terry's Helm of Brilliance. The opals create the daylight spell, so the box is meant to focus that spell into more of a beam. And they also design it so it can clip onto Percy's gun. I believe this is the first episode where Percy and Terry are referred to as Science Bros, although I think they were being called that on Twitter, and that term didn't originate with this pairing. It originated in the fandom that sprung up over Tony Stark and Bruce Banner having so many great scenes together in the first two Avengers movies, but it's sort of been transplanted onto these two because it's a good fit, and honestly, you know, Terry has a lot in common with Tony Stark, and maybe Percy has a little bit in common with Bruce Banner in some ways, so it is a fitting analogy. Meanwhile, Keyleth confides in Vax about how she feels like she's being replaced because Percy's spending so much time with Terry, and she's very clearly close with Percy, so it's always very weird when someone else comes into play. And even though she knows it's not rational, she knows she's a good friend, she's just having a hard time getting used to the new dynamic. There's some crosstalk at this point. It seems like for a minute, Taliesin thought that she was talking to Percy because he had missed the setup. There's a little bit of back and forth and some laughter between Sam and Taliesin as they laugh about that. But then Liam does an excellent job of piggybacking off of that and bringing it back into the scene by establishing that this laughter exists within the world to help reinforce the same feelings that Keyleth is having in the game. It's a really skillful move from Liam. And it also happens to set up a excellent joke.
You guys aren't there.
I got distracted.
I got distracted. No, you guys are busy tinkering. You two are having a conversation where Vax is trying to console Keyleth's sudden friendship crisis.
Got a little smudge right there. A little smudge.
You're missing your friendo time, I
I
understand.
can't fulfill every need.
We
that
hear
we
them
have.
laughing from their room in the distance.
It is a very thin wall.
Yes,
And
Snorting.
it was the metric system.
Vex comes to see Percy after the tinkering is done and asks him about the things Scanlan said, about being able to hear your loved ones from beyond the veil when he was being resurrected. It was different for Vex. She didn't hear anything, and we can extrapolate that might be because she was dead for less than a minute before the resurrection ritual began with the revivify spell, whereas Scanlan was dead for a lot longer and brought back with raised dead or resurrection. And since Percy was also dead for a while and he also got the extended resurrection ritual, she has to know whether he lied to her or not when he said he didn't hear anything from the other side. He confesses that when he was dead and on the other side, what he felt was agony. It wasn't endless torment. It was torment that was going to have a finite end because it felt like he was being consumed. Which he was. His soul was being devoured by Orthax. And he says the only thing he heard was her confession. And he confesses that he never had any hope of anything ever happening between them until he heard her say that, because he thought she was far too good for him. He also says he's less worried now about what happens when he dies. He doesn't worry as much about going back there again, about being devoured by Orthax. But since she wants to hear about his fears, he admits he doesn't know whether the soul of every person he kills, with his gun or Ripley's gun, it doesn't seem to matter, or he doesn't know if it matters. He worries whether these people are being sent back to that horrible place to be devoured by Orthax. And that thought keeps him up at night. And the only way he can think of to find out for sure is to kill somebody and bring them back to life and ask them what they experienced. He had an idea for someone he may want to shoot, and that would be 2 birds with 1 stone, that's how he puts that, but he doesn't say any more than that. But this might be me being a conspiracy theorist, but part of me thinks he might be talking about Scanlan. This is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. We'll talk about this more when it comes up in future episodes, but Percy is still extremely upset with Scanlan, and he will admit that he has put a lot of time into thinking about facing down Scanlan. That's going to come up again. And so since he's so reluctant to talk about whatever thought he's having right now, that's kind of what I think he's talking about here. I could be wrong, of course, but that's the impression I get from this scene, knowing what I know about what Taliesin was feeling behind the scenes and where things are going in the campaign. But we do know from this episode that Percy is worried about what all this is doing to them. He grew up reading about heroes, a lot like Terry. Actually, they don't bring attention to it here, but I do think that is absolutely something they both have in common. They both grew up reading about the exploits of other great men. And Percy's starting to wonder if those great heroes were also plagued with doubt and uncertainty, and wondering if they were actually just the villains in somebody else's story. Now again, I just want to point out here, this is pretty much exactly the same kind of fears Keyleth often expresses throughout the campaign, that they are actually the bad guys, that what they're doing might have larger consequences than they realize. But I've been told repeatedly that she's a bad character and Percy's a good character. That's weird. I wonder if there are any differences between those two characters that might explain why they get such different reactions from the audience. Truly a mystery for the ages. Anyway, moving on. The next evening, they arrive at a collection of 3 islands and a channel of reefs around and between them, and as the ship gets closer, the crew has to look over the edge and watch to make sure they don't hit one of the reefs. They get as close as they can before they just have to stop. Keyleth creates water in the air to make a rainbow around the ship, and this prompts other similar lights from further ahead in response. I believe we saw something similar when the players arrived at the Fire Ashari, and I don't know if Matt and Marisha have discussed this, the idea that maybe each tribe has some way to recognize members of their sister nations, or if Matt is just responding to what Marisha is doing, if she's thinking this is a fun way for a druid to signal that she has druid powers so the other druids recognize her, and he's like, yeah, okay, they'd respond in kind. But if it's the latter, then I really applaud that. She knows that each tribe is likely very secretive, and she wants to have some way to introduce her character to a new tribe in a way that helps them let down their defenses and trust her. So every time she does this, one of these maneuvers, and Matt responds with a similar reaction from the other druids, he's essentially acknowledging that she is correct. There is some sort of protocol for new arrivals. Or at the very least, what she's doing is causing these other druids to recognize her as one of their own. She is successful. Matt also describes how the other players can actually see some buildings in between the islands, because the settlement is actually built onto the reef between these 3 pieces of land. That might seem strange, like why not just build your settlement on one of the islands? But as we'll learn soon, the rift is in the water in the middle of these islands, which means they have to build their settlement right there. So that makes sense to me. I think that's a really clever justification for the real reason the settlement is built on top of the water, because it's cool. You're going to visit a tribe of water druids. I think it would be really disappointing if they just lived on a normal coastal city. But if they live literally underwater, then that would not only be very elaborate, but also very difficult for the players to find them. This is a really cool middle ground that still allows the civilization to live up to what the players have imagined in their heads from the Water Ashari, but also feels rational, at least within the parameters of a D&D world. Keyleth jumps off the boat and swims ahead, disregarding the risks of the reef, but she's fine. The rest of the party flies over on the broom or the flying carpet, and Terry and Dodie trail behind in a rowboat. Robot in a rowboat. Is that anything? The party arrives at this ancient Greece-inspired civilization, and they meet a little boy, and Keyleth asks if he is the leader of this tribe. After all, he greets them, and the only thing Matt told the players in the last episode is that the leader was someone they would not expect. And this little boy says, yes, he is the leader. Now, the players immediately know that that's not true, but I really like how Keyleth doesn't even question it. She's just so trusting of her fellow people, of her tribes, that she's so primed to have her expectations challenged as well. I think most of all, she's also overwhelmed that she's reaching the end of her Aramente, her rite of passage. So it does not even occur to her to doubt this boy, and that's just a really fun character choice. But the boy leads them through the village, and we get a really cool description of how diverse it is, how many different tribes of different kinds of people there are here, how cool the city is, and how everyone is looking at them with some suspicion. It's not quite mistrust, but they're definitely trying to figure out whether or not these new people are safe or not. Then they meet the real leader of the Water Ashari, Uvenda, the Heart of the Tides. She's an elderly gnome woman, and I think it's interesting that Matt hyped her up by saying that she's not what Keyleth might expect, because quite frankly, there's nothing about her that really screams unconventional or unexpected leader. She actually reminds me a little bit of Tuma, the leader of the Ravenites in the ruins of Draconia. Then again, we didn't really see Keyleth's first interaction with the Earth Ashari, so I don't know if she expects something specific from these leaders, and Uvenda is a subversion of that idea. But I actually really wonder if, back in the last episode when Matt was having his NPC tell them about the Water Ashari, I wonder if Matt was just setting up this fun reversal, or maybe he hadn't prepped the Ashari yet, so he literally just had Petit say, their leader is not what you expect. And then he had to figure out between sessions what that actually meant. I'm not saying that's what he did, but I am saying that I have definitely done that in my own games, and I know what it looks like, and that's what happened. Anyway, Uvenda says that she remembers Keyleth's mother, and that kind of throws Keyleth for a loop. Every place she's gone on her Armente, she's been told that her mother came there and passed the trial, but she never came home. So what happened? But Uvenda says, well, no, Vilya did not complete her trial. See, the city is kept afloat by lodestones, which are recovered from the plane of water. Now, lodestones are real things. They're basically magnetic stones, but in this scenario, they're also these sort of magical anchors. The stones lose their magic over time, so the Ashari have to go and get more from time to time to sort of keep the city aloft, or afloat, I guess. But they've discovered that these stones are the natural waste of a kraken, who was living in the area for a long time. They can't kill the kraken, or they will have no more lodestones, and the city will sink, and they won't be able to protect the rift to the water plane. But recently, the kraken has started living right next to the portal, so getting the stones is extremely dangerous. In fact, now they use the stones to try to keep the kraken out of the material plane. It's extra important that they get them now. So the trial is simple. In the morning, you will enter the rift, and you'll go get 3 lodestones without killing the kraken.
Your mother was a brave woman. Very much like you, now that I see you before me. Unsure of herself. Wishing to please and not disappoint. And it's hard to ascertain, but I fear it's perhaps that lack of confidence that may have caused her failure.
Damn, okay, Matt wasting no time making it clear why this is going to be such an emotional test for Keyleth, because this is literally challenging all the uncertainty she's dealt with throughout her entire life. No pressure. Uvenda also explains that Vilya had her own group of traveling companions that she found on her journey, her own adventuring party like Vox Machina. Her companions died in the Kraken battle, but Vilya's body was not recovered except for her leg. They wanted to try to put her to rest and bury her correctly, but they didn't find the rest of her. But Marisha is, among other things, a comic book nerd. She knows what that means.
But we only found the leg.
She's still alive. That means she's still alive.
Hold on to that hope. Use it and finish what she started. She lives through you at the very least. Hold that memory.
I will hold on to it, but I hope you know that that does not define me. I'm not her.
Good. And perhaps you have a chance.
And they are excited for the next session. They are really looking forward to fighting a kraken. But of course, they know they can't kill the kraken. They're very clear about that. They even joke about bringing a bottle of kraken, the alcohol, to the next session, but they know they can't finish the bottle. They can't kill the kraken. It is so interesting seeing how excited they are for this encounter, because minor spoilers here. I should probably actually ask the spoiler siren to do this. Actually, that would be appropriate. Spoiler siren? Oh, that's right. I made a deal with a hag to give me a little bit of a break from the Monsters of the Week, and this video is part of that arrangement, so I can't even request that a Monster of the Week show up in the video. That's interesting. Okay. I mean, I guess that is the terms of the agreement, so... Anyway, it's fine. I can do this spoiler myself. Spoilers. The Kraken fight is rough. And not in the fun way where they get really severely hurt, but they have this awesome challenge still. No, based on my memory and the way we all discuss it in the community, and the way Matt Colville made a whole-ass video in response to it, the Kraken fight is just a slog. I'm really curious what's going to happen when we actually watch it. Maybe it will be secretly good, and we can learn a lot from it. Or maybe not, but it'll be interesting in its failure, and we can still learn a lot of lessons from that. I mean, when I did episode 11, which was the Temple Showdown, I definitely came away with a different lesson than everyone had sort of remembered, and I felt like I was sort of the minority in terms of feeling what the actual problem was. I didn't secretly love that episode, but I was basically arguing that the lesson that we'd all taken away from it was wrong and we should learn something else instead. So I'm really curious if something like that will happen with the Kraken fight. Like, I already have some ideas about what went wrong here, but I'm really curious to see what happens when I actually watch it again for the first time in, like, 7 or 8 years. But we'll get to that video soon. I'm excited to get to that video, but we're not doing that video next week. We'll get to that soon, but first, my last video was about my first character ever. And a couple weeks before that, I made a video about a character I've always wanted to play. Next week, I'm going to make a video about a character that I've always wanted to play, but I don't think I ever will. Because playing that character specifically would be very complicated for lots of reasons. So we'll get into all of that in the next video. But in the meantime, I was actually in the middle of doing some yard work when I had to go stop and make a Patreon video. And that video was a ton of fun, but I do need to go finish the yard work. So I'm going to run out and go work on that right now. Huh. Okay, so here's the thing. This year I've been talking about episodic adventures and Monsters of the Week and how you can run campaigns that aren't tangled up in one long epic quest and are instead a lot more modular. And so I've actually started running a new Monster of the Week campaign. It's a game system that was specifically created to capture the vibe of the episodic TV shows I've been talking about throughout this year, shows like Buffy and Supernatural. And I really want to talk about this game as part of these lessons because this game lends itself so well to those kinds of episodic campaigns and has a lot of advice about running episodic adventures as well as running longer story arcs, much like the seasonal story arcs that I love so much. But I'd only ever played Monster of the Week and I hadn't run it yet. So one of the reasons I launched this campaign is because I'm getting inspired by all the cool episodic media I've been consuming for this year's videos, but also because I want to take this game for a spin and figure out what lessons we can learn from it, and maybe I can then bring those lessons to this channel. Anyway, I mention all that because I'm not sure, actually. I guess it just felt like telling you. That's weird. Huh. Thanks so much for watching. Sorry, again, this video was delayed. Partially it was because I was reading Monster of the Week in preparation for that campaign, and reading other resources for upcoming videos, but mostly I was on Twitter. No campaign diaries for the Monster of the Week campaign right away. I don't have the bandwidth for that, but if you want to see something that's kind of like a campaign diary, go make sure to watch my latest video. It was about my first character that I ever played and all the adventures we went on. It was a really fun video to make, and please go check it out. Not enough of you watched it. I would really appreciate it. Until next time, play fair and have fun.